are a writer, performer, radio broadcaster, coach and career advisor with over 30 years experience, which is huge. You've worked at the stage for over 21 years, where you have your own column, and you have over 25 years experience providing career and business advice to performers in the entertainment industry. And this is via lectures, books, articles, broadcasting, and your own personal management agency. That's massive. I mean, I know 30 years is a long time, but that's still huge.
I think it's. I think anybody who works in the performing industry or the media industry, if they kind of look over all the stuff they've done, it will tend to be lots and lots of jobs like that. I think I'm kind of fortunate in that because I work for the stage, the kind of writing, communication, media side of what I do coincides with the performing, theatrical side of what I do. So in a sense, that's probably why my particular CV is quite long. But I think certainly anybody I know that I started off with, or even that I've come across in terms of interviewing people at the stage, I can't think of a single person that I've met in the last 30 years who just has one job in this business. I mean, everybody has a portfolio career. I often say that certainly when I started off, and I think for a lot of people who started off 30 years ago or 20 years ago, parental concern was always that this wasn't a real job. And it's interesting now because I do a lot of career advice, you know, both to established actors but also to younger people. I do find that parents these days are much more positive about a career in the performing arts or the media. And I'd love to say that's because our business has got any more secure, but I think it's just that every other business has got equally insecure. So to a certain degree, those of us in this business have some practice with juggling lots of things to make ends meet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a quote from you that I've read that your goal is to help support people both both in and out of the spotlight in what is perceived as being one of the most exciting and glamorous, but which can also be one of the most challenging and lonely industries. This made me smile because I think we need more honesty about this. You know, so many people come into this industry and, you know, all they see is the excitement and the glamour, and it's such a small part of it. It's a very, very challenging industry to work in. Now, you're kind of writing on your column for the stage. You must hear this kind of thing over and over again.
I think it's interesting because I always try and kind of get that kind of middle line. Obviously, the one side is that, yes, it's a wonderfully glamorous career, and I suppose it's the kind of picture that sometimes is presented by certain reality TV shows. It's kind of career where you walk in off the street, you have a hit record, or you're in a hit show, and it's instant success, and it continues that way for the rest of your life. But then on the other hand, I also try and avoid the kind of, oh, don't do this, it's a terrible career, you know, that kind of old-fashioned, grumbly, try and put everybody off so you can keep your little part of the industry position. And I think the truth's in the middle. What I always say is that it's not an easy career, and I think anybody who says it's an easy career, you know, it really isn't being honest about it. But equally, it's not impossible. But I think if I decide that my goal is success in terms of glamour and fame, then it's very difficult because that only happens to a very small number of people. Yeah. And as you're saying, I deal a lot through the stage and through my own private practice with people who on the surface are doing very well. But actually, even when they are famous and successful, the backstage of their lives isn't what they would want it to be. I sometimes tell a story of a particular friend of mine. This is going back about 15, 20 years. And this person was in a particular soap at the time. And they were doing kind of a guest role in the soap. But it was quite a substantial guest role. And it's the kind of role where their character was having an affair with one of the regular characters. So it's often when you see the TV listings magazines, they'll have the cover and they'll say, what's happening in the soap this week? Here's the triangle. And my friend in her character was on that sort of cover as the other woman. The thing is, though, she'd done, as you do with soaps, she'd shot the block about maybe 2 months before it was broadcast. So she had got paid well for it, but being a working actor, there was so much money to pay off debts from the money she got from the soap that once she'd paid off the debts, she hadn't got any money left. And I remember she called me one morning to see if she could borrow money to buy one of the magazines on which she was the cover star. And I thought that's quite a common situation for actors. You know, I have a lot of actors that I've worked with and friends who, again, a really common thing is an actor gets a good role. It might be in a drama, it might be in a movie, but again, they get the role, they do the role, they get paid for the role, and then there's a long break before the drama comes on television or the movie gets released.
Yeah.
You know, another friend of mine, I remember walking into one of those, this is back in the day when I had a reason to walk into a barber's. Obviously that was not so much now, but you know those kind of £6, £5 barbers, and I met a friend of mine who is a really good actor, but he was due to be in one of the Lord of the Ring franchises, but he shot that in New Zealand about a year ago. Because of all the special effects, it wasn't due to be released until the following year. So in terms of career success or adding it to his CV or generally using it for anything, it was a year away. And in the meantime, he was working in a barber in Tottenham Court Road. And again, I tell that story for two reasons. One, because it's the way the industry is. And I think much more importantly, I think it's important that actors understand that that's the norm in our industry. So when we're in that situation where we're between jobs, or it's been a long time since we've worked, or it just doesn't seem things are moving at the pace we'd like them to, sometimes it's just a case of accepting that's how the industry is. Because I think if we don't, we then often compare ourselves to other people who at the moment are doing well. And that's always been the case. Yeah. But actually in both those situations that I told you, they were all in the days before social media. So imagine how much more pressure there would be now if you were in that situation, and also seeing everybody, because everybody on social media is always working. But that's not necessarily the reality behind the touch screen.
The fake perception.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So your column, it was Dear John.
It was Dear John.
It's not now.
It was Dear John for a long time. So if anybody follows me on Twitter, my Twitter address is still @DearJohnByrne. Obviously, somebody called John and a Dear John column was match made in heaven. We started the Dear John column on the stage back in around 2005, 2006. And I think the reason it started off that way was that was also around the time that a lot of the reality shows, the musical sort of talent shows, and some of the choosing a West End performer by doing sort of talent show type programs, they were becoming successful around that time. And I think that was a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it made a lot more people interested in the business of becoming successful in the performing industry, and that was probably a good thing. But on the other hand, it gave a very false picture of how that actually happened. So the stage felt that they would like to have somebody who was maybe talking to performers and basically finding out what was the reality of how careers are actually made. So the Dear John column was originally, it was called Dear John because it was modelled on an agony column as such. And people would send in queries, and then I would go and I would interview people who had been through similar situations, or if somebody had a career question, people who were maybe a little bit further on in the career. And that we did that for about 10 years. And then we started to get a lot more detailed questions. So about 3 years ago, we changed the Dear John column to what we call the Careers Clinic, where people send in more detailed questions, and then I give slightly more detailed answers And obviously we change the kind of personal details.
Yeah.
But most times, what one performer is going through or what one performer is struggling with, somebody else has gone through. And quite often another performer has the solution to that. And I think one of the things we try and encourage through the Careers Clinic is basically people sharing experiences and people saying, you know what, I've just read this in the column and this was a question that a dancer asked John. And this answer that John's given, actually I'm an actor, but you know what, the basics of that, because really it's a cliche, but it's true that show business is as much a business as it is the show bit. So quite often some of the business techniques a successful dancer might use could be just as relevant to an actor, could be just as relevant to a director or a scriptwriter. And really it's all about sharing information.
Absolutely. And what type of people are writing into you, and for what kind of reasons? Are they consistent kind of themes and topics that are coming up?
Yeah, I think it's true to say that certainly the range of people who write in is quite interesting, because we get, I was going to say we get performers who are beginning, but actually we also get parents of performers who are beginning, and that's we get a lot of questions from parents. Then we do get performers who are beginning. We get performers who I think reflect what we've been talking about so far, in that they have left drama school. In some cases, they may have picked up an agent from their drama school showcase. They may have also got quite a good job or even two good jobs. And then all of a sudden it stops. And I always think to myself, in some ways, a performer who leaves drama school and maybe doesn't get work instantly and has to kind of concentrate on getting a day job and that kind of building up, that can be frustrating. But in some ways, I think it can be more of a shock to a system for a performer who leaves drama school, goes into something and thinks, well, this is how my career is going to go now. It's going to go. I think even though those of us who are in the industry are good at telling stories and making stories, I think also the way stories work and have worked for millions of years is because they tap into a part of us that likes stories. So, you know, when it's on a Sunday afternoon and you're watching some old Hollywood black and white show business musical, and there's the bit where the person struggles at the beginning, and then usually there's train tracks or there's newspapers, and they flash up on screen and they go, John Byrne opens in small club in Dublin. John Byrne opens at the West End in London. John Byrne goes to Broadway. You know, and it's that kind of building up of a career. And it's great for a musical, but it can almost give the impression that that's how a career goes. And actually, in most cases, careers are much more up and down. And which brings me back to the kind of people that write the column. We do have quite a few people who contact, and they have been successful in things. They maybe were, in some cases, household names from years ago. In some cases, people who've been recently in something. And for them, the questions are often about, well, you know, I did this thing, it was successful, but somehow it hasn't translated into the next stage of my career.
Why?
Yeah, why? Or is there anything I can do differently? So yeah, they're really the full range.
Yeah, it's quite a responsibility, isn't it? It must feel, but also must be very rewarding to be in a position to help people as well.
Absolutely. I mean, again, as I said, we get letters in. That's just my old-fashionedness. A lot of the time, it's emails.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's social media. Sometimes people contact me for conversations. I think what I always say to people these days is I've had the privilege of working with the stage, as you said, for 21 years now. It means I've spoken to a lot of actors. I've spoken to actors who are kind of very famous. I've spoken to actors who are constantly working, if as much as that's possible. Quite often, the people who are very famous and the actors who are constantly working are two different kinds of people. People often assume that's the same. It often isn't. I work with casting directors, speak to producers. So a lot of the time when I'm trying to help people with their queries or their issues, they'll be pleased to know it's not based on stuff that I know. I know a little bit, but it's not based on as much of what I know as lots of conversations that I've had with people. Sometimes I've had a great piece of advice from someone that I can pass on to other people. Sometimes, as you said earlier on, sometimes it's just thinking, every time I speak to a performer, this thing comes up. Every time I speak to a performer who's doing well, here's a thing that they always say they do. Every time I speak to a performer who's not managing to move forward the way they want to, this seems to be an issue that pops up for them. So it's really trying to channel all the kind of conversations that I had the privilege of having with people, and then kind of passing on what's useful from that to a particular individual, and then hoping that what's useful to that individual who sent the query in will be useful to other people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you, I mean, obviously Time's Up was launched in the UK early this year. Have you seen a change since then? Because you really are on the front line of all this, aren't you? You've seen what's happened. Have you seen kind of suddenly people are opening up more?
I think people are opening up more. I will be very honest with you and say that I hear often from people privately who have had, things happen to them which shouldn't have happened to them, across the whole range of bullying, harassment. Quite often people will approach me and they will say, John, I want to tell you about something that happened to me, but I don't feel ready yet to talk about it privately. Now, anything, I've always said this, anything anybody ever tells me is confidential, whether it's for the stage. A lot of the time, if there's a personal, not a Time's Up type issue, but even a business issue that somebody brings me for the stage, I'll sometimes send them a detailed answer for themselves, and then the version that appears on the stage will be a much more general one. Right. People have approached me with situations where they've felt bullied or manipulated, sometimes in drama school, sometimes in the industry. Obviously, what I try and do is direct them to people that can help, Equity being an example. But people do come and they say, this thing has happened to me, and I'm just telling you because I want to tell somebody, but I don't feel ready yet to talk about it. I think one of the powerful things about the Time's Up movement is that as more people talk about it, it can empower somebody else, either to talk about it or maybe just to get some help. And I think a lot of the time it's somebody hears about somebody else's experience and they have two realizations. The first one is that, well, that doesn't sound right. Because I think sometimes in any industry, but particularly in our industry, we can be so dependent on other people to give us work, that we can put up with things and almost accept as the norm that we're putting up with things, which if somebody else was going through them, we'd be the first to say, no, that's not right.
Power dynamic.
Yeah, so I think people hearing other people's stories can sometimes just help them realize that something that they've been putting up with or an experience they've had hasn't been right, and then, as I say, as more people speak out about things, and particularly the collective speaking out about things, that can be really helpful then in terms of encouraging somebody else to get help or speak out. But I think while I absolutely support all the people who speak out individually, I think this is the whole kind of situation of bullying in the industry, harassment in the industry, unfairness in the industry. It's only ever going to be solved by a collective move.
Yeah.
And I think that when I say that, I'm very conscious that it can sound like collectively people who've experienced it, people who've been victims, have to get together, but they shouldn't have to, because those of us who have any kind of power in the industry are the ones who are in the best position to change it. Yeah. And I think so. I think it is happening. It's not happening nearly as fast as it should be happening. And I do think that those of us in any kind of position of power or influence need to be constantly considering what can we do to help those changes happen faster.
Totally. Because I think when it was first launched, it was in every newspaper, everybody was talking about it, and it was off the back of obviously what happened over in the States. Yes. They opened up a fund, people were putting millions of pounds in, and then a couple of months later, and you don't hear about it. And we're, it's coming to the end of the year, and I wondered quite a lot in the last few months. I wonder what's happening. How's that money being spent? What, and I know that Equity are doing a lot, and they've set up helplines. But yeah, I really hope it doesn't go quiet.
Yeah, and I think I think the issue has been raised by all that publicity, and I think what we have to all be careful of is not kind of riding the wave of the publicity of it, and saying all the right things and not actually doing anything, and then another issue will come up, and the focus will move to that, and actually a lot of the issues are linked. For instance, you mentioned Equity, who do have a helpline, and people who are experiencing harassment or discrimination can contact Equity. Equally, Equity quite rightly are very vocal on the whole area of low pay and no pay. In a sense, those two things are linked, because a lot of it is if I as an actor feel that my work is in the gift of somebody else, that gives that person a lot of power over me. And it can sometimes tempt me to make decisions where I do things for nothing because I feel there's no other alternative. And then equally, if that person who I want to work for, who I'm told is very important, behaves in a way that's inappropriate, I can be fearful that if I say no, then what will happen to my career? Yeah. If I speak out, what will happen to my career? So I think a lot of those things are definitely linked, and quite often linked back to the fact that I think actors as people who are business people who are empowered to make their own choices is maybe a perception that, again, I think more actors and more of the industry are delivering that message now. But for a long time, I think it's been the opposite. It's felt very much like, as an actor, I'm totally at the mercy of the phone ringing, and somebody else giving me permission to do whatever it is that I want to do. Which
is funny. It goes back to what we started talking about. Is you see this world of this amazing glamour and powerful actors, and in a lot of cases it's completely the opposite, isn't it? It's very different to what a lot of people think.
Yeah, I had an experience years ago where I worked with a lot of, as well as actors, I worked with a lot of presenters, and I remember, I think I was on an afternoon off, so I was at home and I put on the telly, and I happened to see a presenter friend of mine who was presenting a game show. And it was one of those it was a computery type game show. So they had a laptop on their desk as part of their game show hosting. So I happened to be on email. I said, "Oh, see you on television. I don't normally get to see you on television. Nice to see you." And what I hadn't realized was that between the kind of rounds of the game show, they were also on their laptop. Not mentioning the name because I would, but. So we had this little weird email conversation where they were on this live game show, and I was emailing, just how's it going? And in between the rounds, because there was cutaways basically, they were emailing me back. And while we were having this conversation, what my friend was saying was, actually, things are not going so well, and I'm having a really difficult time. And because I'm doing this presenting job, I'm not spending much time with my kids, and I'm feeling guilty about that. But it was really surreal having this conversation with somebody who, when they were on screen, was, hey, yeah. And I thought that was a real kind of indication of the difference between what we perceive to be the power and success. The person who's in the spotlight, the person who's hosting or co-hosting the game show, and actually what's often going on for them behind the scenes.
So, as well as providing a lot of advice to actors and helping actors, which is amazing. It's newcomers, very experienced performers. You also do a lot of coaching yourself as well.
That's right.
How do you approach coaching? What would should someone expect if you were to coach them? Because you do one-to-one as well as kind of lectures and drama schools and lots of.
What I try and do is find out two things. Find out what the person would like to achieve, and that can be different depending whether somebody's beginning or whether they're. I sometimes meet actors who are very well established in a particular medium, perhaps theatre, and want to move into screen, or vice versa, or sometimes just are well known for a particular type of character or type of production and want to move into something different. So the first thing is to find out what they want to achieve. But I think equally or more important is to find out, and when I say find out, it's help them find out. Help them find out why they want to achieve what they want to achieve. Because quite often that can kind of unlock a whole range of possibilities. And from those possibilities, you can then help the person make a plan to, and again, I'm always really wary of coachy language where they can get to the next level or that kind of stuff, but because actually you can't guarantee anything in this business. What I think you can do is you can help a person identify what they're doing that's working, what they're doing that might not be working, and then help them make a plan to maybe for a period of 3 months or 6 months, try something different. And again, I don't think you can guarantee that that thing will work, but you can guarantee that by the end of 3 months or 6 months, they'll have a much better idea of whether it's working or not for them. Which I always think is, because every business, if I walk into a cafe and there's 3 customers in the cafe, I might decide, well, the cafe's not doing very well, there's only 3 customers, but maybe that's a cafe that's jammed at lunchtime. And if I walked in at 11 in the morning, I can't make that decision based on what I see when I walk in. Similarly, I could walk into a cafe that's jammed at lunchtime, but maybe they're open for the whole day and they only get customers at lunchtime, so I can't decide it's successful either. Which I think is the reason why most businesses don't make decisions based on today. They make it on what's happened over 3 months or 6 months. And I think that can be a very useful process for an actor who's running their own business, which in effect every actor is. And what can often happen, I think, is that when an actor's in a production, they're surrounded by other actors and friends. When they're in drama school, they're surrounded by other people. Once they're not in drama school and not currently in a production, it is that kind of cliche where it can be quite lonely.
Yeah.
And there's nobody really to bounce stuff off. You know, I mean, I think what a lot of actors look for in an agent is sometimes something that isn't what an agent offers. An agent's job is to get an actor work. It really isn't to be a friend or to be a sounding board, because obviously if an actor was spending their time using their agent as a sounding board and a friend, the agent wouldn't be getting the actor work, and neither the agent or the actor would be happy. So I think for me, coaching is a way of kind of being that kind of objective person who can help an actor find their own solutions. Certainly offer advice and maybe be able to offer perspective based on other people I've worked with, but more than anything else, I think it's just giving the actor a chance to explore what's going well for them, what's not going well, and make a plan to get to the next thing they want to explore.
It's interesting because we go through these, incredible drama schools and fantastic training, but it is once you leave there, it is a business, and I think there is, perhaps a lack of support or lack of education in how to manage yourself as a business and in this very challenging industry. I know you actually go and lecture in drama schools, don't you? What type of thing are you?
In a sense, that's what I do in drama schools, and I mean, I do a lot with Lambda at the moment, and I've done other drama schools as well. And it's very much kind of giving people that business perspective. But to be honest with you, and I think other drama schools maybe could do it a bit more. I think even drama schools that do it could do it a bit more. But having said that, what I try and do is bring a perspective that includes stuff that I've learned from studying other businesses that are not acting. And actually, from what I gather and what I read and the people I talk to, every small business person goes through this. There'll be lots of small businesses think, I hope we get customers this year. I hope my online offer draws in the customers, because in effect, this will dictate how I can operate for the next 6 months or so. And if you look at the statistics for small business, a lot of small businesses fail in their first year.
Yeah.
Sometimes because it's just a lot harder than the person perceived it to be. I mean, the classic small business is somebody who, we have a lovely bookshelf beside us, maybe somebody who makes ornamental book covers for their friends for Christmas, and a friend says, you know what, they're beautiful, you should sell those. And the person thinks, well, I'll set up a small business, I'll do the markets, and sometimes it goes really well, and then sometimes it doesn't take off quite as quick as the person expects it to. And I think any successful business person then has to have that commitment and drive to keep going with it.
Yeah.
When the initial kind of excitement, when they've sold to all their friends, and then they have to find new customers. And sometimes success in business is just driving through those periods of doubt. And I think in some ways that can be very similar for actors as well. When we're not
Absolutely.
in the drama school environment where we're surrounded by like-minded people, or when we're not in a production, which can be tremendous fun and energy,
Yeah.
it's keeping ourselves going in the periods between those times. And I think a lot of it is just keeping going. I think where the coaching and the advice element comes in is if we just keep going but it's not working, then there's not much that will happen at the end of that keeping going. I think if people have the drive to keep going, but we can help them explore and adjust what might work, and what might be helpful, then I think that put those two together and it can become quite a useful combination. And I suppose, do I think that drama schools should do more to create that business sense? Absolutely. But having said that, I think just as I'm wary of kind of actor courses that guarantee that if you do this course you'll end up, in the West End, I'm also very wary of business books that say if you follow these 5 steps to business, you'll be a millionaire. Because the truth is that all of us are unique and different. So a lot of the time it's about finding our own way. And I think that's work that business advice can help with, but it's really for each of us to take the time and apply it to ourselves. And I think we're in an industry sometimes where we can feel that we don't have that time. I think social media hasn't helped, because I think a lot of us, I think social media is really important.
Yeah.
I absolutely encourage actors to use social media and be on social media, both in terms of getting themselves out there, but also in terms of picking up information about castings, about what people are looking for. But having said that, we all spend a lot more time on social media that before social media we invested elsewhere. So I think working out how to use our time in a kind of a productive, balanced way can be a really important thing in any business, but particularly in our business.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a thing, you can have the most incredible actors, but it really is a mindset and skills outside of acting to progress and be successful in the industry, isn't it?
Absolutely.
There's so much more to it.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest skills, which I actually would call a business skill, I think one of the most important business skills, because I don't know any business that doesn't put a lot of effort and time into maintaining its premises and maintaining its tools and making sure that everything that it needs to do its work with, whether it's a fleet of vans or whether it's computer systems, are up to date and virus free. That's just basic common business sense. As actors, in a sense, our tool is, yes, our acting talents, but it's just our physical and mental well-being as well. And I think that's something that if we're not careful, that can get pushed to the end of the queue.
Yeah.
So again, I'm really pleased that I know that the MTA has done a lot of work in establishing the Time for Change movement, which is a charter sort of supporting mental health, which a lot of drama schools I know have signed up to, and other institutions and so on. I think that's tremendously important. Leads us right back to, I suppose that in a sense, that's almost like the other side of the Me Too movement. There's the responding to, and there's the very welcome dealing with abuses that have happened or can happen. But there's the positive side where we need to keep ourselves mentally and physically fit and in good condition, because then we are better placed not to fall into being exploited, and equally just to keep ourselves going.
Yeah. You've been coaching for a long time, and obviously the industry has and is changing massively. Has the things that you're coaching and the way you're coaching, that presumably has to evolve as well with it. So how What kind of change have you seen?
One change that I've seen is that on some of the practical things, an example I sometimes give to actors just about the changes is a very common thing in the industry now is people getting showreel scenes made. Even though we're now in the era of self-taping, quite often actors will also sit down either with a friend because these days you can do it on a smartphone. They'll make a scene that kind of shows a characterization or one of their casting types. They may still go to a company which makes scenes, and these days that's very much a norm. And most agents, if they're taking on an actor, will want them to have some kind of real sort of on showreel footage or at least some clips. When I started off 25, 30 years ago, the only actors who had sort of scenes were actors who'd done BBC jobs or ITV jobs, and it was almost considered the height of egomania, you know, to make your own sort of scenes.
Right.
So that's one sort of thing that's changed completely. Most people, I think, are aware that 5 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, the thing to have on your show reel was a nice sort of montage with wonderful music at the front of it. That's now, you know, that's flipped over now, where most casting directors say, no, we haven't got time to watch montage, no montage, no. So there's those kind of little changes in fashion. When it was when it was mainly the spotlight book as opposed to online casting, there was a lot of discussion about an actor's photograph because that was basically their photograph for the year. These days you can have a range of photographs and so on. So those kind of logistical, practical things probably have changed over the years. But I often say that the thing that doesn't change over the year is that a question that a lot of actors ask me in some shape or form is, am I doing this right? And I think that the mechanics may have changed and the tools may have changed, but I think for a lot of us, we still, because we're kind of a self-employed business without much other businesses to genuinely have an honest conversation with, we're never sure whether we're doing it right. And that in the last 30 years hasn't changed at all.
Really? And the uncertainty.
Uncertainty, yeah. And to a certain degree, I think living with that uncertainty is probably a really important actor skill, you know? And I think what I always try and say to people is, you know, without breaking anybody's confidences, it's one of the most common things that I hear from every actor that I speak to. So if that's the case, if an actor's having a day when they're feeling really uncertain, that's not unusual. So you don't need to feel uncertain about feeling uncertain.
Yeah.
It's much more about just learning to sort of cope with that uncertainty. It's why I sometimes encourage actors to, when I know some people will say, well, you know what, it's the kind of business where you can't really have a plan. And to some extent that's right, because it is very much dependent on what happens, who's casting, whether somebody drops out, the classic kind of the 42nd Street story where you're in the wings and somebody falls over and it's your big moment. And that does happen in the business. And our business often is a hostage to fortune in that regard. But why I think it's useful to have a plan is it's always good to know where we're heading, because occasionally we'll have to make a decision, and it will either be a decision that we make when we're having one of those uncertain moments. And it's almost like if we have given some thought to what we're trying to achieve, we can make a decision even when we're feeling a little bit uncertain about it. And it might not be the right decision, but we can say, well, you know what? It's the one that I think will get me closest to the thing I actually wanted. I think that's equally important when that happens, when the other thing happens in an actor's career, which, again, a lot of actors will have experienced. It would be lovely if you got one job, and then the next job, and the next job. What normally happens is you get no work, and then you get 3 jobs, which are all good jobs, but you can't do them at the same time. And again, it can be really important to go back to, well, what am I trying to achieve long term? because sometimes that's the one yardstick that you can use to decide between what look like three equally good options. Again, can I guarantee that you'll make the right decision based on that yardstick? No, I can't, but at least you'll make a decision, and then you can commit to that decision and do your best to make it work.
Yeah. And are there a sort of set topics that always come up in your letters, in your coaching? I mean, we talked about uncertainty, but presumably things like confidence.
Confidence, absolutely.
Kind of key things that come up at times.
Yeah, confidence is certainly one. A perennial, which hasn't changed over the years, is how can I get an agent? And the second perennial is I've got an agent, it's not working, what do I do? And that's always a really interesting one, because I often meet people who want to talk about the fact that they don't feel their agent is the right agent or getting them enough work. But sometimes I meet people and they've literally signed with the agent 2 months ago.
Right.
You know, and I'm saying, you know, honestly, it's too early to make a decision. I mean, if an actor comes to me and says that I've been with the same agent for 3 years and I've had 2 castings, well, then we can maybe decide that something's not working. But I think a lot of actors, and I say a lot of actors, I think sometimes a lot of agents as well, kind of there's a general kind of over-promising at the beginning, that there's a honeymoon period. And like every other aspect of the business, it just takes time.
Yeah.
So if an actor has been with an agent 2 months and they haven't had that many castings or even any castings, I would think it's slightly too early to make a decision either way. If an actor has been with an agent 6 months or 9 months and they've had no castings, I think it's certainly time to have a conversation to see, and I think it's really important to have an agent you can have a conversation with. A thing that hasn't changed over the years, which I've never understood, in the sense that it's probably one thing that I certainly wouldn't want to put up with in my own career, is the number of actors who speak to me and say, I'm not really happy about how things are going with my agent. And I say, well, have you spoken to your agent? Oh, no, I'll be afraid to speak to my agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, that, I mean, obviously, I'm involved in an agency. I know lots of agents. Most of the agents that I know are very open to working with their actors and speaking with their actors, but there do seem to be these terrible relationships still in the industry where actors are afraid to speak to their agent, and that's just not that's not a working relationship.
No, it is. I hear that a lot as well.
Yeah.
It's very common. So you founded the talent agency New Wonder Talent. How long ago was that, and how's that going?
It's New Wonder Management,
Sorry.
but it's an agency which is full of talent. And I have to be honest and say that I founded the agency with my wife, Lola Williams, who's the lead agent. And there's no way this is going to sound any way kind of objective, but is a really good agent. And I was really happy that Lola wanted to start the agency, because we've been going about 5 years now. I think we're going into our 5th year. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to kind of take, in some ways, a very traditional approach, where we work with actors and kind of develop them. We should say help them develop. We don't do anything to anybody, but we help the actors develop. But equally, we've tried to embrace social media and all the new ways of promoting actors. And I think putting that combination together is working very well. I think we've deliberately kept our numbers reasonably small, because we wanted to sort of give time to building ourselves. And we've obviously tried to have quite a diverse range of clients as well, because we think that's important. And I think about any agency, basically, I think what's been the most positive thing for Lola and myself, and I know Lola would say this if she was here, is because she's probably off negotiating something at the moment. She never sleeps. But the truth is that the thing that we're most happy about is all the actors in the agency support the other actors in the agency. So if one of our actors has a casting, there'll be lots of good luck messages from other actors. If an actor gets a casting, there'll be lots of congratulations. If an actor's in a show, other actors on the books will promote each other. And that's something that we're really grateful for. I mean, I think it tells us that we're signing the right people. Because I think very much in the industry, for me, a hugely positive change in the industry in general, and I'm always wary of sounding like old father time, but it is that the younger or fresher generation of actors, I do think, and maybe it's because maybe it's the positive side of social media. Actors do seem to support each other, promote each other, and have a real understanding that if they promote somebody else's work, ultimately that will come back to them. You know, that it's not that, maybe that kind of stereotype of the actors who are very competitive, and I suppose it's quite often a stereotype that we see in old-fashioned movies about actors and TV shows about actors, that kind of very bitchy kind of everything is about me. And one thing I can say is that in my 30 years of work with actors, I've met very few of the me type actors, and a lot more of the supportive actors. And I think what's great now is on social media, not just with our agency, but in general, actors are supporting each other. Actors are doing things like setting up new writing nights, and quite often the audiences for the new writing nights will be other actors. You know, that's something that's really positive about the industry.
And much more of a community.
Very much a community feel, which I think is a great thing, and a really good development, not just for actors but for the industry as a whole.
You're in a really nice position, actually, with all your experience, to be an agent as well and be able to kind of advise and support people in that way. It's quite unique.
I think it's certainly, I think it's a slightly different role, because obviously as an agent, your main task is to find work for actors. As I say, that's something that we both do, but that Lola does really well. Sometimes when I'm awake at 2 a.m. because she's looking at castings on her phone, I would rather she didn't, but I'm sure the actors are pleased she's doing that. But yeah, it's very much to try and sort of help actors get the work that they would like to get, while at the same time being realistic with actors about the kind of work that's out there and available. As we always say, we can work very hard for an actor, but we can only, in the sense of an agent job, we can only help an actor get through the door for the roles that are out there. Then I suppose in my kind of coach role, that's often about helping the actor create the opportunities that they can create for themselves. And I think another good thing about the industry at the moment, I think it's good to talk about the good things as well, is that I think there's, just as it's now acceptable for actors to make their own show reels, there's much more acceptance of actors making their own work as well. You know, and certainly speaking on behalf of our agency, we're fully in support of actors making their own work, because ultimately it's a partnership with the actor, and the more that we all work to get the actor out there and get their talent seen, the better. Yeah. I think it's great that actors are now feeling free to do that, and when an actor writes their own play or gets involved in their own production, it's no longer perceived as, well, they're just doing that because they couldn't get work.
Yeah.
Because actually quite often they're doing something that realistically probably wouldn't fit into the more kind of narrow castings world. But it's great to see actors doing really personal pieces. Back when I started, it was often the only way to do a really personal piece was to do stand-up comedy, because that had kind of the facility to allow you to talk personally. But now we see actors doing personal shows about all kinds of things that interest them or are important to them. And that's a really great thing to see and to encourage.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think makes a good actor?
If I knew that. Well, that's an interesting question, because I think we have to define what good is. I know lots of good actors, you know, for different reasons.
Yeah.
I think maybe a more useful question that I could answer is, what do I think makes an employable actor? Mm-hmm. And by employable, I mean either producing their own work, or getting employed in castings or to perform other people's work. And I think there's a couple of things. I think flexibility is important. I think one of the things that's most important is an actor who understands that they're part of a team. It might just be a team for that production, but they're part of a team, because over the years when I have had the privilege of working with very famous very distinguished actors. One thing I've noticed is quite a lot of them are just as aware of what the camera person is doing or has to do, or the sound person. So they know how to give other people in the production what they need to make it collectively a good production. And I think an actor who has an awareness of that will go quite far in the industry. Reliability, punctuality, I think that's important. I think for me, an employable actor is also an actor who has a realistic idea of their own casting. Again, I'm not saying that an actor can't necessarily play against their type. Absolutely they can. But I think in the initial kind of casting process, they will tend to get cast according to their type. I think quite often they can then do something of their own which demonstrates something they can do that possibly people didn't realize they can do, or maybe sometimes they didn't even realize they can do. And occasionally then the industry will say, oh, hang on, this person's good at that as well, and so on. But I think with any work person, it's being reliable. It's having a really good grasp of all the tools that are at my disposal, so I know what to do with each one. And I think for me the last thing is being really supportive of other people, because that will get you work. Besides the fact that it's a nice thing, it will get you work. Because I think, to go back to horrendous business books about networking, at the beginning they were often about how to get people to give you stuff, how to get people to give you work. And that's not actually networking, that's just manipulation. I think proper networking is meeting lots of people and connecting with them and finding out how you can help them. And then reciprocally that will come back to you. It might not come back from the person that you're helping, it might come back from some other source. I know a lot of actors who've done a showreel scene to help out their friend because it was their showreel, and actually that particular scene then ends up getting the actor who was helping a role,
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you very much. I could talk to you for much longer. Sadly, we have to end it there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lisa.
Some great information in there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.